Welcome to the To Be Honest podcast. Today, I'm talking with Jenn Johal, who is a community education trainer and certified mental health first aid trainer for crisis support services of Alameda County. Through her work, she provides both suicide prevention trainings as well as mental health first aid trainings, which provide adults with the knowledge and information needed to notice the signs and symptoms of a mental health crisis. She also works on the receiving end of Alameda County's 24/7 crisis line and can provide some insight into what it's like to call a crisis line. So welcome, Jenn.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, thanks for being on the podcast. And I should note that Jenn is also a friend. So this is going to be a fun conversation.
Yeah, totally.
So before we get going, I want to ask every guest, to be honest, how are you doing today?
Well, to be honest, I'm actually doing okay today. It was a good weekend. It was nice and restful. So I'm feeling good. How are you?
Oh, thanks for asking. I'm doing pretty well today. Yeah, I feel like now that we're past the election and we had some good news over the weekend of Biden being the president-elect, I'm feeling better than I was before. Better than last week.
More hopeful.
Definitely more hopeful. So let's talk a bit about your background. Would you mind telling everyone about your experience with med school and your background in public health?
Yeah, for sure. So I guess my path to this career started many, many, many years ago with an interest in science. And I'd actually planned on pursuing medicine and even, went to med school with this goal of becoming a primary care provider. And the reason I was interested in that particular field was because when I was in school, I remember seeing so many patients who had these preventable health issues. Like specifically, I remember seeing kids who were 8 or 9 years old on the verge of diabetes, and we were trying to do symptom management at this point. And so obviously it's a very complex issue, but I felt one of the pieces that was at play there was this lack of health education. And so I became really interested in prevention and health education because our health system is so focused on just treating the symptom. Like our health system's really impacted, and that's kind of where we are at this point. And I felt that primary care would be a place that I could do that effectively. Medicine didn't work out for me, and that's totally okay. But I knew I still wanted to be involved in healthcare and in prevention. And so that's what led me to public health, because that is what that field is all about. So I got my MPH a couple of years ago, and now I work in suicide prevention as a community education trainer.
Awesome. Yeah, I love how you blended the two together and kind of like found your path to public health, which is how we met, which is another thing to be grateful for.
Totally. Yeah, we literally got each other through that program.
Yes. So how did you become a trainer? How did you find your job, and how did you, what was the training process like for that?
Yeah, so after we graduated, our program was kind of focused on health education. So I was looking for health education opportunities, and this one popped up. And part of what really interested me about it was that they talked about how they provide suicide prevention trainings to medical providers. And I thought that was really cool, because thinking back to my medical education, I didn't have a lot of training in suicide at all. Like if someone came into the ER, our protocol was kind of like, okay, call the psychiatric department and get a consult. I personally didn't feel well equipped to handle that situation on my own. And I imagine that there's other people in the field who felt the same way. So I thought that was really cool. And I thought it would be a good opportunity for me to put that medical background to use, because I know that system. I know the language they speak, and I thought I could, kind of blend my two backgrounds together. And then the other thing that was interesting to me was I had people in my life who have struggled with mental health issues, and with suicidal ideation. So there was also that personal pull as well. And now I get to work with a team that I really love working with, and I get to do work that I really believe in. So it's been a really good experience for me. And then as far as the training process goes, it was a lot of learning for me because, like I said, I didn't really know a lot about this field. So I was reading a lot of books, research papers, and then training with other folks on my team. I would go observe presentations. I would ask a lot of questions. Um, and then there was also, of course, that training for the crisis line as well. So our crisis line program requires a pretty intense training program. It's about 40 hours of classroom training and then 40 to 50 hours of crisis line training. So you're paired with a trainer and you work one-on-one with them.
Nice. Sounds very comprehensive. So you're fully prepared.
Totally. Yeah. They make sure you know what you're doing.
Yeah. How many trainings do you do per year, do you think?
Oh man. I would say before COVID, we were training. There's three of us who train on the adult side of the program, which is what I train in. We would sometimes be doing like 3 presentations each every week. So yeah, we're a pretty busy program. And then on the youth part of our program, they go see young people in schools. They probably train a couple of thousand youth every year.
Yeah. Has your training changed since COVID started? Are you doing things more virtually now?
Yeah, we're doing everything virtually right now. So there's definitely that learning curve of
Yeah.
how technology works.
Yeah.
But we're lucky that agencies have been willing to work with us and we've been able to adapt to that online learning. And then we actually put together our youth program as an online training as well. So we're back in schools talking to young people as well, which is really awesome.
Oh, nice. That's really cool. If someone were interested in taking either like a suicide prevention training or a mental health first aid training, what do those look like? Like, is it one day of training? Is it a week-long training? What is that like?
Yeah. So, well, first, let me start by saying all of our training is free for Alameda County. But our trainings, they're tailored depending on who our audience is and the community that they serve. They're typically in the range of being from like 1 hour to 2 or 3 hours, again, depending on who we're talking to. And our most basic training covers like general stats to provide context. We talk about warning signs and risk factors. So, we're trying to train people on how to tell when a person might be suicidal. And then we talk about how to help and how to ask about suicide specifically, because I know that's a really tricky question sometimes for people to ask. So we give examples, we provide handouts. Um, and like I said, we train just about anyone and everyone. Like we have general community members, we train teachers, healthcare providers, mental health clinicians. We go to senior centers. So really, we we can talk to anyone and provide training for them. And then for our mental health clinicians, that's kind of our more robust one. So that would include some more information on like theory and suicide risk assessment and intervention. So again, depending on who we talk to, our trainings can be different. And then the other one is mental health first aid. So that is actually an evidence-based program. I think it started in Australia, and that is something that's taught in many countries all over the world. It's an 8-hour training, and it's kind of like a mental health 101, sort of akin to like a CPR first aid, if you will, where you kind of learn the basics about recognizing and supporting someone who's experiencing a mental health crisis. And a big part of that class is learning like this 5-step action plan that can be applied to different mental health crises. And I know they've also adapted that one to be online. So we offer that to the community as well.
That's really great. I really liked what you said about suicide prevention and how it is for the trainings are for everyone, even people in the field of mental health, because we can all use a refresher on that that topic, because it is so taboo and so hard to talk about with other people. So
Absolutely.
I like that it's open to everyone and anyone.
Yeah, definitely.
Why do you think health education and suicide prevention are so important in our community?
Well, I think suicide is a public health issue. It's the 10th leading cause of death, or at least it was before COVID. And we often find that people who are experiencing suicidal thoughts are in a lot of emotional pain, and they're looking for a way to relieve that pain. And so I think it's important to educate the community that there is help and resources out there. And so one of our goals with training is to provide those resources and, raise awareness that this is something that's preventable, and see if we can connect people to other coping mechanisms so they don't have to live in that pain in silence. And I also think another important piece of this is that community members are really, really important in suicide prevention. They're kind of in positions to help people and to recognize when something is off. And so I can't put enough emphasis on the value of community members being kind of like those boots on the ground. So we want to provide them with those tools to be able to support someone who's going through a really hard time.
Definitely. That's super important.
Mhm.
And what do you think is the best part of being a trainer?
Well, I would say what I love most about my job, at least pre-COVID, was being able to interact with my community. Because I grew up here in Alameda County, so being able to work here and um, serve my community is something that's really, really special to me. And I'm definitely not someone who's cut out for a desk job. So what I really love is that I get to go to different places and meet different people and provide different kinds of training. So that feels really fulfilling. And I guess to be honest, like this isn't easy work. It's really hard to talk about suicide and about death, and it's just really heavy stuff. And so when I'm out there, even if it's just one person that I connect with who, feels more confident asking about suicide, or comes up to me and says that they have a loved one who struggles with a mental health issue or with suicidal thoughts, and this training gave them insight on how that person might be feeling, that's really rewarding. And I think it's definitely something that kind of helps fuel my fire as to why I do this work.
Yeah, you feel the true impact of what you're doing and gives you
Absolutely.
the purpose. Yeah.
Yeah,
Um,
exactly.
is there something that you could share with us about, like something from the trainings that would be helpful to someone currently experiencing either suicidal ideation or just negative mental health, especially as a youth? I know that a lot of this is targeted towards youth, so I'm just curious if
Mhm.
there's anything that would be specifically helpful for youth to know about, if they are feeling these things, if there's someone they should talk to specifically or who they can reach out to.
Totally. So with youth, I think one thing that we always talk about is reach out to a trusted adult, whether that's a parent, a coach, a faith leader, reach out to someone that you really trust. And for Alameda County youth, we have a text line that's available from 4 p.m. to 11 p.m. So a person texts the word safe to 20121 and they can get connected to a counselor. So that's something that we talk about in our trainings. And then I would also mention that if you're supporting someone or if you're worried about a friend or a family member who might be suicidal, one of the big things that we talk about is asking about suicide and being really direct about it. And I always say be direct because I get that question of like, well, can I ask someone if they're thinking of hurting themselves? And my answer is you can, but just remember it's very different from wanting to die. So it's super important. Like if you start the conversation just to ease into it by asking that question, it's really important to follow up with that direct question about suicide. And the way that we train folks to do it is to say what you see and hear. Say like, I've noticed that you haven't been coming to Zoom classes and you haven't been texting me back. I'm just really worried about you and I want to check in. Are you having thoughts of dying? So we try to give examples on how to do it, but yeah, just be really direct and show a lot of compassion and empathy.
Yeah, I think that's really great advice, especially, yeah, being direct. I know it's so hard. So hard. Even I've been through suicide prevention trainings before, and it's even when you practice it with someone, it's
Mm-hmm.
hard to ask that question because it just feels so awkward. But I think,
Yeah,
like you said, like easing into it and asking those lead-in questions is really important to getting to that point and being
totally.
direct.
Yeah, and it's not an easy question to ask either. I
Mhm.
mean, when I do these trainings, I always am very transparent with people of like, yeah, when I practice this, I always think like, oh yeah, I can totally do this. I ask it
Yeah.
on the crisis line all the time, but when you do it in person, it's so different when you can see that person's reaction and you're
Mhm.
making eye contact.
Yeah.
So my tip is always practice by asking yourself in a mirror so you kind of hear it out loud.
Mhm.
Or if you have a pet, you can practice asking your dog or your cat.
A good
That's also
idea.
helpful.
Definitely. So, let's talk about the crisis line. As someone who calls into a crisis line, I know that it can be nerve-wracking or you don't know what to expect. So, when someone calls into the crisis line, what can they expect?
Yeah, that's a really good question because, like you said, it can be really intimidating and nerve wracking to call in. So, when a person does call in, one thing they can expect is to be connected to a counselor who is highly trained and very compassionate. And our counselors are mostly volunteers rather at crisis support services, and they're all trained in suicide assessment. So most likely you will be asked if you're having suicidal thoughts. And the reason we do that is just so we kind of know what's going on and we can provide the caller the right support and resources that they need. They're also trained in crisis de escalation. And so, what that means is when someone calls, we really try to listen to their story and build connection and offer hope to a person. And we try to find ways to help them collaboratively cope through that crisis because what we know about a crisis is that it has a start point and an end point. And if we can help that person get to that end point without calling emergency services, that's our main goal. Like our very last resort is going to be getting emergency services involved. Because I know that's a fear that a lot of people have calling into the crisis line. But we ourselves know that that can be really traumatic in and of itself. And we know people do better when they get to stay in the community. So that's always our top goal. That's not to say that it never happens. There are times that we do have to get emergency services involved, but our main goal is to build connection with a person and to help them cope through those moments of crisis. We don't give advice on the crisis line, but we offer emotional support. And if the caller wants it or asks for it, we can also offer local resources to mental health services, to things like services for homelessness and other resources as well.
Yeah, I think that's really great. I like that you mentioned that you build connections with people because I think that is, I don't know, but I'm assuming when people reach out at that point, it's because they are looking for a connection. They are looking for
Yeah.
someone to talk to about how they're feeling. So I think that's a really important part of the process.
Yeah, absolutely. And we hear that a lot with folks who are experiencing suicidal thoughts that they feel alone and hopeless and that nobody cares and so that's what we really try to do when we build connection is let people know that hey, you matter
Mm-hmm.
and we're here for you.
Yeah, that's great.
Mm-hmm.
And you kind of answered this in your last answer, but how does the crisis line help the community or bridge gaps within the community?
Yeah. Yeah. So kind of like I was saying, we know that connection is a protective factor when it comes to suicide prevention. So that's really at the heart of what we do, letting a person know that they're not alone. And so I would say that we are a part of the community's safety net. We're part of that. We're kind of complementary care to other mental health services. So we're not a replacement for therapy or anything, but we can complement that care. Many people are alone and they don't have support and they are isolated. And so that's kind of another way that we provide that connection to those folks.
Yeah, definitely. And I do want to mention that I think calling a crisis line may seem like abnormal, but I feel like you guys probably get calls on, I'm assuming, a daily basis. That's a very common thing.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I don't know the numbers off the top of my head, but we probably take, I don't know, maybe hundreds of calls in a week and a day. I'm not entirely sure, but we are a pretty busy crisis line.
Yeah. Have you seen an uptick during COVID times?
Yeah, definitely. I would say we've had an increase in call volume. And for me personally, at least having been on the lines, I've noticed callers that I've talked to are also having increased risk for suicide as well.
Mm-hmm.
And I think I was reading a stat somewhere earlier that just all across the Bay Area, there's been an increase in crisis line call volume by about maybe 20 to 25%.
Wow. Yeah. I mean, that's not super shocking just based on the circumstances, but it still is. It's hard to hear that so many people are struggling right now.
Yeah. Yeah. People are going through some stuff and it's hard too, because we don't know how long this is going to last as well. So there's that like fear of the unknown that's making things more complicated.
Definitely. Yeah. That and isolation and stress. And yeah, there's so many factors that can contribute to poor mental health right now. So
yeah, absolutely.
We're lucky to have you and the crisis line helping us out.
Yeah.
What would you tell someone who may need to, but is scared to call the crisis line?
Yeah, I would say it's normal to feel a little intimidated, and it definitely takes a lot of courage to call and to be vulnerable with someone that you don't know on the phone. And so to anybody who's feeling that way, I would say that our counselors are some of the most skilled and compassionate people, and they genuinely want to help. And, a person doesn't need to be suicidal or even in crisis to call us. If you're just having a really bad day and you want someone to talk to, it's okay for you to give us a call and check in with someone. Like I said, we're here to offer that connection. And you can also just call to try it out. Be like, hey, I've never called this service before. I want to see what it's like. And our counselors can kind of give you a rundown of what we do and the services that we offer. And, I would also say sometimes it's helpful to call with another person. Like, say, someone who's struggling, you might say to them, like, hey, there's this resource. I think it might be really helpful. Why don't we check it out together? Let's call together. And so having that support can sometimes make it easier to reach out. But yeah, if you're struggling and especially if you're having those thoughts of suicide, please pick up the phone and connect with a counselor, because there is support out there and you matter.
Definitely. And in regards to the text line, I'm just curious, do you get a response right away? Is that 24/7 too, or is it on a like as needed basis?
Yeah. So our text line, ours is specifically for youth in Alameda County. And so it's not available 24/7. It's only 4 p.m. to 11 p.m. But what they would do is they text the word safe to 20121. So that's the opt-in word. And they get a couple of automated messages, and then they get connected to a counselor right away. And then there is a 24/7 text service, which is a national service, and that's for people of all ages all over the country. And they would text the word connect to 741-741.
Awesome. Yeah, thanks for clarifying that. I just wanted to make sure.
Yeah.
The hours of that. So let's talk about behavioral health and mental health in a larger sense. Just curious, why do you feel so many teenagers and young adults avoid the conversation around mental health?
Well, I think there's a lot of reasons. And I think one is that we as a society don't really talk about mental health. Or if we do, we talk about it in a really stigmatizing way. So, for example, if you see someone talking to themselves on BART, people kind of assume that there's something wrong with that person or that they're dangerous. And people internalize that and they might not want to talk about their struggles. And so I think the way that we see people with mental health issues depicted in media can also be really dangerous. And this is really something that's harmful and can hinder these conversations from happening. And I think because we don't talk about it, people think they're alone in that experience as well. And I would say that in addition to stigma, I'd say education can play a role. Not knowing what to say or fear of saying the wrong thing is something that prevents these conversations from happening as well. So it's definitely a complex issue.
Definitely many factors, whether like you said, like it could be a person's lack of education or just the, not accessing or not having access to the resources that could provide that education, or, there's the cultural stigmas and barriers and taboo and society in general. Yeah. It's a whole bunch of things.
Totally.
To say the least. So what do you think we can do collectively to erase the stigma around behavioral health?
Well, I think one thing is just normalize talking about it and normalize seeking professional help. I think correcting our language is one thing that would be helpful. And this is, it's not easy to do. But if we all kind of take those steps of being mindful of the words that we're using and gently letting others know that the language that they're using is harmful can go a long way. I know, when I teach, at least, this is something that I try to address with my groups is use people first language. Like don't define a person by their mental health issue. So instead of saying like so and so is schizophrenic, saying so and so lives with a diagnosis of schizophrenia, because a person is so much more than whatever it is that they're going through. I know also for our Teens for Life team, they used to take posters to schools that could be put up in classrooms about reaching out for support. So I think the more that we normalize it and change our language, like those are kind of the first steps. And it definitely takes some self-reflection. We have to kind of look at our own biases and overcome discomfort in ourselves to be able to make a community-wide change.
I like that you pointed out language, because I think it's so common to say like the word crazy or like you're feeling psychotic, or there's those terms that we use in everyday life that people don't sometimes realize can be harmful to those who are actually living with mental health issues. And even if it's not the intent to hurt those people, it can have that same impact. So yeah, I think that's really important.
Yeah, I totally agree with what you said.
What advice would you give to youth experiencing mental health issues right now?
I would just say that you're not alone. And you don't have to do this alone either. Because, like I said, because we don't talk about this, I think people feel really isolated in their experience. But the reality is there are other people who go through this. And I want them to know that recovery is possible. Like, it's not easy. It's definitely a journey that has its ups and downs, but it's definitely possible. Like, people who experience mental health issues can and do live really fulfilling lives. And I know that it's hard to reach out, and it's also really important to reach out because you matter and things can get better.
I think those are some great words of wisdom. I couldn't have said it better. So you kind of mentioned before that it can be really heavy to talk about suicide and behavioral health issues during work. So what's something that you do every day to take care of your own mental health?
Well, I love my dog. So hanging out with my dog is definitely something I do. We go for walks every day. So that's a really good stress reliever. I know like when I'm on the crisis line, it can be really tough as well. So I like to have something with me while I'm on shift to bring some levity. So maybe I'll have like a coloring page. I make sure I have my good snacks. Um, but yeah, I also like reading. So I'm doing that, watching some really bad reality TV. So it's a variety of different things that I like to do to kind of decompress.
Yeah. I know Jenn is a movie buff and
Yes.
can give some really good recommendations on movies. So I'm sure that's a good
Well,
de-stressor too.
I don't know if they're good recommendations,
It's true.
but
You just like those movies.
yeah.
Let's talk about the future, something that you're looking forward to, whether personally or professionally. Yeah.
Yeah. Honestly, I think I'm kind of just looking forward to the holidays this year. It's been a really long year. It's been a tough year. So, it'll be nice to see the new year come in and have some time off during the holidays. I know you and I are both fans of the Hallmark Christmas movies, so I'm looking forward to some of those coming up. But yeah, I'm looking forward to, having family through Zoom. We'll probably do some Zoom family sessions, but just,
Mhm.
yeah, getting a little bit of a break.
I think we all deserve a break at this point in life
Mhm.
in general. So
Totally.
that'll definitely be nice. Well, thank you so much for being on the podcast. I was wondering if you could share again where people can go to learn more about Alameda County Behavioral Health Services and the crisis
Mhm.
line.
Totally. So they can visit our website, which is www.crisissupport.org, and they can follow us on social media. So we're on Facebook. You can search for Crisis Support Services of Alameda County. We're also on Instagram. Our handle is at CSS Alameda County. And on Twitter, our handle is at CSS Crisis Line. And then, of course, they can also reach the 24/7 crisis line if they need some support. So for Alameda County, we're available 24/7 at 1-800-309-2131. And if anyone's living outside of Alameda County, they can call the National Lifeline, which will connect them to their local crisis line. And the phone number for that is 1-800-273-8255. And then, of course, youth can text the word SAFE to 20121 to be connected to our text line between 4 p.m. and 11 p.m.
Awesome. Thank you so much again. I think everyone
Yeah.
will learn a lot from what you had to say, and you always have those words of wisdom that I love. So thank you
Oh,
again.
thanks. Yeah, thanks for having me. It's fun
Yeah,
chatting with you.
chatting with you, and I'll talk to you soon.
All right.
Bye.
Bye. Bye.
If you were able to join us for the whole episode, thank you so much for listening. We are so grateful to have you and hope you choose to keep listening as we continue to share stories from youth and young adults in Santa Clara County. If you would like to learn more about To Be Honest and our podcast, please visit tobehonest.today. Our website has everything from mental health education to an online screening tool, resources, and so much more. And if you are interested in being a guest on the podcast and would like to share your own experience with behavioral health, please email us at tbh.today@gmail.com. We also have all of this information in the show notes, so we hope to talk to you soon.